How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Aleph, Daf 41 of Masechta Sotah. Friends, we're getting towards the end of Masechta Sotah. Masechta Sotah went pretty quick, Lamaisa, no? Masechta Sotah went pretty quick, Lamaisa, no? We're already in Daf Mem Aleph already. It's over in Mem Tes. I guess it's not that long, Lamaisa. But alright, I think it's been okay so far. Daf Chof Tes and Daf Lamed. If anybody tells you Daf Beis is hard, you tell them. But otherwise, it's been alright. Friends, today we got a lot to do, Lamaisa. We have about a daf and a half betzim to do. And they're not the smallest dafs, not the longest dafs either, but we got a bunch to do. We're going to do 2 Mishnayos and the Gemaras, and then my aim is to get to the end of the Perek, and tomorrow we will start from the beginning of the 8th Perek. That is my plan. What's today? Tuesday? What's today? Tuesday? Tuesday's alright. It's the day before Wednesday, which is the day before Thursday. Thursday's already, alright, the end of the week. Alright. Well, got a lot of work to do. Alright. We're going to start off Mem Amud Beis, about 5-6 lines into the page by the Mishnah. Birchos Kohen Gadol Ketzad. Ho ho. So, tell me about the brachas of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So Chazan HaKnesses, the brachas, and then also we're going to talk about the reading of the Torah. Chazan HaKnesses, so the beetle in the shul, the shamus, notel sefer Torah v'nosna l'reish HaKnesses, and he gives it to the gabbai be'etzim, right? So like in my grandparents in Far Rockaway, in the white shul, my grandfather was the gabbai, and there was Rabbi Hecht. He was the shamus. In my shul in Teaneck growing up, we didn't really have a shamus, but in the white shul they had a shamus, and that was Rabbi Hecht, and my grandfather was the gabbai. So the shamus would give the sefer Torah to the gabbai, v'rosh haknesses nosna l'sgan, and the gabbai would give it to the sgan. Of course, you know about the sgan Kohen Gadol. That was the fellow who would take over for the Kohen Gadol. In case the Kohen Gadol becomes Tomei and Yom Kippur. V'asgan nosna the Kohen Gadol, and then the sgan would give it to the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol oimed u'mekabel v'korei. And then the Kohen Gadol would stand up and he would receive the Torah from the sgan, and he would read Achremos v'ach be'esor, and he would read these parashas of Achremos and Ach be'esor. V'gol alas Torah u'manicho b'cheiko, and then he would roll up the Sefer Torah and he would hold it. Ve'omer, and then he would proclaim that more than what I am reading to you today is written in this book. Go weiter. And then he reads Be'eser shebechumash hapikudim in Bamidbar by heart. So he reads these 2 parashas, Achremos and Ach Be'esor, which are in Sefer Vayikra. He reads that from the Torah. He then wraps up the Torah, rolls it up, holds it, and he says, "Look, I'm now going to be reading by heart the parsha of Be'esor in Bamidbar, but don't think it's because it's not written in this Sefer Torah. It's written in the Sefer Torah, but I'm going to read it by heart." The Gemara is going to explain why. So he's saying, look, more than that which I'm reading today, part of which I'm reading by heart, is actually written in the book. I'm just not reading it from the book. Where am I? Okay, and then he makes 8 brachas ala Torah, right? He makes the birchas Torah at the end. Vala avoda, right? Ritzei, vala odoyo, which is modim. And then he says v'amechila so'avon, right? Bracha related to Yom Kippur. And then he makes a blessing for vala mikdosh, vala Yisrael, vala kohanim, vala Yerushalayim. That's 8. V'ashar tefillah, and then he goes vayt with the rest of the tefillah. It's a shaila if the shar tefillah is a 9th one, or if, I think we'll understand it as being the rest of the tefillah. Fine. So then, okay, great. Babel Yod. Okay, let's go back to Shmasmina Cholkin covered the Talmud b'makom arav. Very interesting. So the Gemara says that we see from the Mishnah that even though the Kohen Gadol is standing there the whole time, still the beetle gives it to the gabbai gives it to the sgan gives it to the Kohen Gadol. Why don't they just give it to the Kohen Gadol? He's standing right there. He's the greatest of them all. And yet we're giving it to students, right? Sort of going up one level at a time. which means that we're basically, right, we're giving it to the Skan, let's say, who's not on as high of a level as the Kohen Gadol. We're giving it to the Skan before, why don't we just give it to the Kohen Gadol? So we see, that you can give honor to the student, even if the teacher is there. The Kohen Gadol, who says Abai, not necessarily. Maybe you could say that if the teacher is there, you should not be giving honor to his students. You should go straight to the teacher. But actually, in this case, what's interesting here is that by giving honor to, right, the by the shamis, giving it to the Gabbai, who then gives it to the Sgan, who then gives it to the Kohen Gadol, this is actually a greater display of respect for the Kohen Gadol, because it shows not only is he honorable, but he's sort of, relatively speaking, 4 levels up in honor, right? So therefore, it's sort of it's more honorable to him to show that, like, that there's a hierarchy here, and he's at the top of the food chain. Okay. So now the Kohen Gadol now stands up and he reads from the Sefer Torah. Omed Michlal Yoshivu. So if we're saying that he stands up, that implies that until now he's been sitting. But I thought the only people that are allowed to sit down in the Azorah are the Davidic kings, the kings from David, not the Kohen Gadol. The Bible says, "Vayovo Hamelech David," that King David came by Yeshiv Lefnei Hashem, and he sat down before God. Vayomer Mi'anochi v'Gomer. So only kings from the Davidic line are able to sit in the Azorah. Kedam Rav Chisda, so the Gemara says, well, it's like Rav Chisda says Bezras Noshim, Ochanam Bezras Noshim. Just like Rav Chisda says in a different place, in the context of Hakel that we're about to learn about in the next Mishnah, Rav Chisda says that it takes place in the Ezras Noshim, not in the Azorah, in sort of the part of the Beis Hamikdash before the Azorah, that's called the Ezras Noshim. So, and that does not have the holiness of the Azorah, so that is where he was sitting. So just like Rav Chisda says by Hakel, by the Ezras Noshim, so here also by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, we're talking about this taking place, going down in the Ezras Noshim. Meisvei, we have a kasha. So actually, the Hagos Marav Ransburg, he says change it to Ditanya, right? Kiditanya. As we learn in a Brisa that we see where Rav Chisda says that it's the Ezras Noshim. Vechen Korenbo. Where do we read the Hakel? Ba'azor, in the Azor. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Omer b'Har Haboyis, says Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, no, it's on Har Haboyis, Shenem Vayikra Bo, Lifnei Rechov Asher Lifnei Sharamayim, that by Ezra and Nehemiah, they read the Torah on Har Haboyis. Omer of Chisda be'Ezras Noshim, so says of Chisda, what it means is that it was in Ezras Noshim. So when it says the Azorah, it means the Ezras Noshim. Alright, fine. The Ezras Noshim. Okay, fine. V'korei ach reimos v'ach be'esor, ho. And, so then the, okay, fine. Okay, so just to clarify from the previous thing, that meaning it was a kasha on, initially we had it as a kasha. How can we say the Ezras Noshim? Because we have this machlokas here. Either it was the Har Habayis or it was the Azorah. So if Rav Chisda answers, he's talking about the Ezras Noshim, and just like over there it says Ezras Noshim, so also by, right, just like by Hakel's Ezras Noshim, so also by Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, it's the Ezras Noshim. Okay, fine. So v'korei ach reimos v'ach be'esor. So it says that he reads ach reimos, and then he skips to the parsha of Ach Be'esor, which is a few prakim later, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's a few prakim later. So for a minute, we have a kasha medalgim benovi medalgim b'Torah. That while you're allowed to skip around in the prophets, you're not allowed to skip around in the Torah. So how could the Kohen Gadol just skip from Ach Reimos to Ach Be'esor? So Amar Abai lo kasha kam b'chdei sheyifsok haturgman kam b'chdei shelo yifsok haturgman. So Abai says it's no problem. It depends. As we discussed, was it yesterday, that when they would read from the Sefer Torah, they would read a verse and then they would translate it. I guess in Aramaic they would translate it. So while the translator is doing his translation, as long as the reader can get from, in this case, as long as the Kohen Gadol can get from Ach Reimos to Ach Be'esor, which we're assuming that he can, So then it's fine. You can move around even in the Torah. But one second, but we teach you're allowed to skip around in the prophets. You're not allowed to skip around in the Torah. Ve'ad kama medalgin, and in the prophets, how much are you allowed to skip around? Ad kidei shelo yifsok haturgimon. That in the prophets you can skip around as long as you get to where you need to go before the translator finishes translating. So what do we see? So we see that in the prophets, when we say that in the prophets you're allowed to skip around, that is only as long as you can skip around and get to where you need to go before the translator is finished translating. Michlal, which implies the batorah klal klal lo, which implies that by Torah you can't skip around at all. That even in the prophets, when we say that you're allowed to skip around, it's only as long as you can get to where you need to go while the translator is still translating. If not, then you cannot. Implying that by the Torah, you can't move around ever. Ela Omer Abai, rather this is Abai lo kasha, kan bo inyon echod, kan b'shnei inyonin. Oh. And Afkamina is if it's the same topic or not. So says the Gemara, look, basically, when it comes to skipping around in the Navi, there's only one condition. When it comes to skipping around in the Torah, there are two conditions that need to be met. When skipping around in the prophets, the only condition that needs to be met is if you can get to where you need to go by the time the translator is finished translating. However, when it comes to skipping around in the Torah, there is that. Yes, you have to be able to get to where you need to go by the time the translator is done translating. But additionally, it has to be on the same topic. You can't skip from one topic to the next topic in the Torah, because if people get confused, then they might actually make mistakes regarding halacha, regarding what the Torah is actually saying. So Ve'atanya, and as we learn in a Braisa, medalgin b'Torah be'inyan echod, that in the Torah we're allowed to skip around as long as it's within the same topic. Uvinavi b'shnei inyanin, but in the prophets you can skip around even if it's in different topics. V'chan b'chdei shelo yifsok haturgman, and in both cases, of course, both by the Torah and by the prophets, you would have to be able to get to where you need to go by the time the translator is done with his translation. Ve'medalgin minavi lenavi uvinavi shel shneim. I'm sorry. Ve'medalgin minavi lenavi. Now, but you can't skip from one book of prophets to another book of prophets. Uvinavi shel shneim osar medalgin. But in Treyosar, right, which are Hosea and Amos and Ovadia and them. So you can move around from one of them to the next. As long as you don't go backwards. Can't go backwards. But in Treyosar you can move from one book to the next. Fine. Okay. Okay, we say then after he reads Achremos and Ach Be'esor, so then he rolls up the Sefer Torah and he holds it. And then how come he needs to make his announcement that more than what I'm reading today is actually written in the Torah? Or more than what I'm reading now is actually written in the Torah, including what I'm about to read by heart. So that nobody should think that there's any problems with the Sefer Torah. No, the Sefer Torah is fine. It has everything that it needs. But the Kohen Gadol is just reading part of it by heart. So he reads that parsha by heart. Why not just roll the Sefer Torah to the parsha Be'esor in Bamidbar and read from there? Now, it's obviously a funny question because we just explained that you'd have to be able to get there by the time the translator is done translating, and this is too far away. But okay. So Amr Avuna bar Yehuda, Amr Sheshes Lefishin Golin Sefer Torah B'tzibur, because we don't roll a Sefer Torah in the in a congregation out of respect for the congregation, that they shouldn't have to sit there waiting. So that is why we don't go from Sefer Vayikra to Sefer Bamidbar. V'leisi Sefer Torah Acharina v'likrei ho. Fine, but still, why does the Kohen Gadol have to read it by heart? Bring two Sefer Torah, and he'll read from the first Sefer Torah Achremos Nach Be'esor, and then from the first Sefer Torah, and from the second Sefer Torah he'll read Be'esor. V'likrei. Where am I? So v'leisi Sefer Torah Acharina v'likrei, bring Nocha Sefer Torah. Ravuna bar Yehuda Omar Mishum Pagam Rishon. Well, says Ravuna bar Yehuda, well, you might think that there's something wrong with the first Sefer Torah, that's why we don't bring a second. Because we don't make brachas that are not necessary, right? If the Kohen Gadol is going to make a bracha on the first Sefer Torah, then he's going to have to make a bracha on the second Sefer Torah. why should we make that additional bracha? Right? Don't bring out another Sefer Torah that would require additional bracha. It's not necessary. You can just read it by heart. Better you should just read it by heart. But now going back to what Rav Huna Bar Yehuda said, do we really have to be concerned that anybody will think that there's a problem with the first Sefer Torah? Right? Rav Huna Bar Yehuda said that we can't bring out two Sefer Torah because the people might think that there's something wrong with the first Sefer Torah. But is that really a concern? Didn't Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha say that if Rosh Chodesh Tevis falls out on Shabbos, i.e. Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, the longest benching of the year, right? Ritzei, Ya'alev Yavo, and Al Anisim. So when you have Rosh Chodesh Tevis, that right, Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh Tevis that falls out during, which always, of course, falls out during Chanukah, and if it falls out on Shabbos, which it does quite often, it feels like, maybe Shalosh Torahs, so you bring 3 Torahs. You take out 3 Torah scrolls. One of them you read the Parsha of the week, which is generally Parshas Miketz. And on the second Torah you read about Rosh Chodesh. And the third Sefer Torah will read about Chanukah. Well, or at least the Korbanos of Nisim. Tlosa is new. So no, Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, I thought we have to be concerned that people are going to think that there's something wrong with the first 2 Sefer Torah. So Tlosa Gavi b'Tlosa Sefer like a Pagama Chad Gavi b'Trei Sefer Ika Pagama. So says the Gemara, look, on Rosh Chodesh Teves that falls out on Shabbos, and we bring out 3 Sefer Torah, it's 3 separate aliyahs with 3 separate people. So it's clear, okay, you have 3 separate people reading from 3 different parshas in 3 different places in the Torah using 3 Sefer Torah. Beseder, no big deal. But if you have one person who starts with 1 Sefer Torah and now they have to bring out a second one, they say, wait, what's the deal? I don't understand. Why did they bring out? What happened? Is there something wrong with the first one? So 3 different people with 3 different Sefer Torah, Beseder. But one person with multiple Sefer Torah, people might get the wrong idea. Okay. And they might think that there's something wrong with one of the first Sefer Torah. Well, if there's 2, they might think there's something wrong with the first one. And then he makes 8 brachas. So he makes a bracha on the Torah like we do in shul. I guess nowadays that would be so assuming that that's the same bracha that they made back then, it would be that. Vala avoda, ritzei, vala oda, modim, v'mechilas avon. Right, the bracha that's specific to Yom Kippur. Ketiknon, like we say in shul. Al amikdash b'fnei atzma. Then he has a separate bracha for the Beis Hamikdash. Val koyanim, and for the priest b'fnei atzma, he has a separate bracha for the priest. Al Yisrael b'fnei atzma, a separate bracha for the Israelites. Val Yerushalayim b'fnei atzma, a separate bracha for Jerusalem, where I live. V'hashar tefillah, and then the rest of the tefillah Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught hashar tefillah tchina rino vakasha. Okay, the rest there's prayer, supplications, rejoicing, vakasha, asking for stuff. Sha'amcha yisol tzrichin livosheah, that your nation Israel needs to be salvationed. V'chosim b'shomei tefillah, he says Baruch Atah Hashem shomei tefillah mikan ve'elach, unless it's, I guess, Baruch Shem Kvod, Baruch Shem Kvod. What was it? What did we say? Baruch Hashem l'olam amin v'amin shomei tefillah or something? No, Baruch Hashem men ha'olam v'ha'olam shomei tefillah or something? Whatever it is, he says shomei tefillah at the end. Mikan ve'elach kol echad ve'echad maybe sefer Torah mitoch beiso, and then everybody would go and take their own personal private sefer Torah that they had in their house, v'koribo, and they would read it, v'chol kachloma, and so they would bring the sefer Torah from their houses and read it. How come? Kidei laharis chazus al-rabim, to show it in public, right? Because as Rashi points out that we learned at in the beginning of Masechta Nazir, Zakeli Vanveu, Hisnoy the fun of mitzvahs, and we said a Sefer Torah Noy, that everybody has a beautiful Sefer Torah, and therefore they would bring it to the Beis Hamikdash and they would read from it. Very, very interesting stuff. Okay, and now we get to the next Mishnah about Hakel. Let's read the Mishnah. Parshas HaMelech Ketzad. So what's Hakel? Tell me about Hakel. So Motzai Yom Tov Arishin Shel Chag. So on the second day of Sukkot, Bashmini, on the 8th year, B'Motzai Shvius, after Shemitah, right? So this year is the year after Shemitah, right? So this year is Hakel. So on the second day of Sukkot, Osen Lo Bima Shel Eitz Ba'azor. So they make a bima, like a platform of wood in the Azor. And he sits on it. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Miketz sheva shonim b'moed v'gomer. Okay. Chazan HaKnesses noto Sefer Torah v'nosna l'rosh HaKnesses. So the beadle takes the Sefer Torah and he gives it to the Gabbai v'rosh HaKnesses nosna l'skan. The Gabbai gives it to the Skan Kohen Gadol v'askan nosna l'kohen. Skan Kohen Gadol gives it to the Kohen Gadol. V'Kohen Gadol nosna l'melech, and the Kohen Gadol then gives the Sefer Torah to the king. V'amelech omed, and then the king stands up. U'mekabel v'korei yoshev, and he receives the Sefer Torah and he reads sitting down. Agrippus Amelech Omar v'kibel v'korei omid. Agrippus, the king, however, he stood up. He received the Sefer Torah from the Kohen Gadol v'korei omid, and he read from the Sefer Torah standing. V'shibchu chacham, the chacham praised him for reading the Sefer Torah standing. And when Agrippus, the king, got up to the verse of you can't make for yourselves a king, a Gentile king, Zol Goen of Dmos, he began to cry. They said to him, Agrippus, they said, don't worry, King Agrippus, you're our brother. But apparently his mother was Jewish, his father was King Herod, who was not. Vikori Mitrilas, I think that's the point. Herod was not Jewish? Is that correct? Well, his mother was Jewish. This Agrippus, his mother was Jewish. Vikori Mitrilas Eila Dvarim, and then he reads from, so the king reads from the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, Ad Shema, until Kriya Shema Vayom Shema, then he reads Vayom Shema, Aser Ta'aser, Ki Techal La'aser, Ufashas HaMelech, and he keeps on jumping around, Uvrachos Uklalos, and the curses and the blessings, Ad Gomer Kol HaParsha, until he finishes that Parsha of the Brachos and Klalos, Brachos Kohen Gadol Mevarech Osan, HaMelech Mevarech Osan, and the blessings that the king makes. So the blessing that the Kohen Gadol makes, that we had in the previous Mishnah, the king also makes them, Ela Shenosin Shal Regalim Tachas Mechilas Ha'avon, right? But instead of the brachos related to Yom Kippur, the king would make blessings related to Sukkot. So basically, Hakel, if you didn't pick it up from this Mishnah, is that on the year following Shemitah, on the second day of Sukkot, so on the year following Shemitah, on the second day of Sukkot, the king would read from the Sefer Torah to all of the people that were gathered. And then he would make those blessings at the end. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara, Bashmini Sakadaitich. Okay, so the Gemara says, look, that the Mishnah says, right, Bashmini. So on the 8th, it implies the 8th day of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeres. Bashmini Sakadaitich, Ema Bashminis. So it's not, because it's not Shmini Atzeres. We said it's the beginning of Sukkot. So Bashminis, so no, it's the 8th year. How come the pasuk needs to go into such detail, right? It says, Miketz Sheva Shanim B'moed Shnas HaShmita B'chag HaSukkos. How come all these descriptors? So tzriche, we need all these descriptors, the Kasav Rachmana Miketz, because if we would only say at the end, Havamina Nimnu Me'ashta, I might think, that at the end of the sojourn in the desert, that immediately when the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael, they start doing Hakel. So V'afagav lo Misramish b'Shmita, even though there hasn't been any Shmita, right? Shmita is only started after the conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the settlement, which was another 7 years. Only then did Shmita start. So Kasav Achmana Shmita. That's where the pasuk needs to specify Shmita. That no, this only happens after a Shmita year. Because of Achmana Shmita, and if it only say Shmita, Avamina b'Sof Shmita, I might think at the end of Shmita, but before the next year begins. Because of Achmana b'Moed, it says no, at the holiday of the next year. Because of b'Moed Avamina Mirei Shata, I might think, okay, fine, so Rosh Hashanah. So Hakel happens at Rosh Hashanah. Because of Achmana b'Chag HaSukkos, it says no, it's not Rosh Hashanah, it's Sukkos. Because of Achmana b'Chag HaSukkos, Avamina Afilu Yom Tov Achron. And if the pasuk only said Sukkos, I might think at the end of Sukkos. Because of Achmana b'Vo Kol Yisrael, therefore it says when all the people come, Me'aschal to Moed, from the beginning of Sukkos. Now, because we're not going to do Hakel on Yom Tiv, so we do it the next day, on the second day of Sukkos. V'chazan HaKnesses, notel Sefer Torah, v'nosno l'rosh HaKnesses. So one second, so meaning, so we're not going to do Hakel on Yom Tov because you have to build this bima and stuff, and we're not going to do that on Yom Tif, and okay. And Rashi says that we don't do it before Yom Tov because it would make it would just kind of make the Azara all cluttered. So we just push it off till the second day of Sukkot, and that's when Hakel happens. Fine. So now we said that the beetle gives the Sefer Torah to the Gabbai, who gives it to the Skan, who gives it to the Kohen Gadol, who gives it to the king. Shmas Mina Cholkum Kavod L'Tamid B'Makom Harav Ho Ho. So we see that you can give honor to students when the teacher is there, right? You have the king who's there, and yet they're giving it to the beetle, to the Gabbai, to the Skan, to the Kohen Gadol, finally to the king. So we see you can give honor to students even when the teacher is there. No, actually, all of it is out of honor to the king, that it shows that he's mamash the top of the food chain, that it's going up and up and up until it finally arrives at him. And then the king stands up and he receives the Sefer Torah v'kor Yosef, and he reads it sitting down. Whereas Agrippus, however, received the Sefer Torah and he read it standing. But if he says he stands up, that implies that he was sitting. But I thought we said that only Davidic kings were allowed to stand in the Azara, nobody else. Shenemar, as the Bible says, that King David came and he sat before God, but only kings of Davidic descent. So just like Rav Chizda had said by the Ezras Nashim, so we're talking about in the Ezras Nashim. Fine. And the Chachamim praised Agrippus. Friends, I live next to Agrippus Street. And the Chachamim praised Agrippus for standing while he read from the Sefer Torah. So if they praised him, that implies that he was doing a good thing. But doesn't Rav Ashi say that while the leader of the Jewish people, right, the Nasi, the head of the community, is allowed to be mochel on his kavod, he could say, look, I don't need this honor. But a king, you can't just say, I don't need this honor. A king needs to be honored. That's part of like the thing of a king. A king needs to be a person who is objectively honored. And therefore you can't just say, no, I'm going to stand up while I read from the Sefer Torah. No, a king needs to sit. He's the king. So how come if they praised Agrippus, then that means that he did a good thing? He didn't do a good thing. I thought kings need to objectively be honored. They can't just say, you know what, I'm moichel. I'm going to stand. So, shenemer som tosum alecha melech shtei masu alecha. That you shall surely place upon yourselves a king, that you have to fear him. Mitzvah shiny. Yeah, but it's different in the context of a mitzvah. If you want to stand up for the mitzvah, you can stand up for the mitzvah. Okay? And when Agrippus got to the verse of you can't place upon yourselves a Gentile king, he got all teary-eyed. That we learn in a brisa that when the rabbi said, no, Agrippus, it's okay. What did he say? Achenu ato. Achenu ato. So they said, no, it's okay, you're one of us. They were kissing up. That at that time, the Yidden were deserving of destruction, Agrippus, because they were kissing up to Agrippus. Really, he wasn't fit to be a king. He wasn't fit to be a king. He wasn't, he's not exactly David HaMelech or Shaul or Shlomo. He wasn't fit to be a king. Omer Ibshim ben Chalaftom Yom Shegover Agrofa Shel Chanufa, says Ibshim ben Chalafta, once the people started kissing up, Nisabsu Adinim, all the judgments got all messed up. Niskalkul Amaisim, and all the actions got all messed up. And nobody could say to his colleague, Masa Gedolim Maisecha, my actions are greater than your actions. Everybody is a bunch of messed up people. Darish of Yehuda by my Rava of Item Reb Shimon ben Pazi, Mutter la'achne flo Rishoyim b'olam hazeh. You're allowed to kiss up to nudniks in this world. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Lo yikari od linovel nodiv u'lechilai lo yomar shua. That in the future, in the time of Mashiach, so they will no longer call nudniks good people, and people with all who desire wine and all sorts of things. They won't say you're a gewaldige fellow. But implies that until now, though, yeah, we can kiss up to the nudniks. Reb Shimon ben Lakish says that Jacob says to Esau, he says that now I've seen you, it's like I've seen the face of God. He's kissing up to him. But it's okay, you can kiss up to a nudnik. But this argues on Reb Levi's explanation of what happened there. Why was Jacob saying to Esau that seeing your face is like seeing the face of God? It wasn't to kiss up to Esau. It's like a fellow who invites over his other fellow, and he realizes that this other fellow wants to kill him. So let's call him Reuven and Shimon. Reuven invites over Shimon, and Reuven realizes that Shimon wants to kill him. So Reuven makes a plan. He says, Tam tavshil zeh shani toim, the taste of this food, tastes just like the food that I tasted when I was visiting the king. Omar, Shimon says, what? Yodele Malka? Wait a second, Reuven knows the king. Shimon got all nervous. He didn't want to kill somebody who's got protexia with the king, so he left him alone. So that's exactly what Jacob was doing as well. He wasn't trying to kiss up to Esau. He was saying that wow, seeing your face is like the face of God. And Esau's like, what? You see God? I'm going to leave you alone. Amar Reb Elazar says, Reb Elazar, that a fellow who's a kiss up, maybe afla olam, he brings anger to the world. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, v'chanfei leiv, kiss ups, yasimu af, they create anger. Not only that, el she'ein tfilos nishmas, his prayers are not heard. Shneimar lo yishavu ki asarim, that they will not be saved. Okay, don't be a kiss up. All right, fine. Simin af over again. Neither gola. V'amar Reb Elazar says, Reb Elazar called Adam sheyesh bo chanufa, a fellow who's a kiss up. Afilu ubrin shebmei imam mekalanoso. Even unborn fetuses curse a kiss up. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Omer la rosh tzadik oto, a fellow says to a nudnik, you're a gewaldige mensch. Yikvu amim. The nations are going to curse him. Yizamu leumim, and the leumim are going to get angry at him. Ve'in kov ela klala. When it says yikvu amim, it means a curse. Shenema lo kav okel. It says by Bilam that God is not cursing. Ve'in leom ela ubrin, and leom is fetuses. Shenema leom mileom ye'emot. That by Esau and Jacob, when they were fetuses, that it says one of them is going to overcome the other. Farmer Belazar called Adam Sheishbo Chanufa, a fellow who's a kiss up, Nofel Begadim, goes to hell. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Hoy Om Lara Tov, woe is to the people who say to evil good for the Tov Ra, and to good evil. V'gomer Maksiv Achor. What does it say afterwards? Lochen Kechol Kash L'Shon Eish, just like straw is consumed by a tongue of fire. And I forgot what that means. That fire basically consumes stuff. You're going to go to hell if you're a kiss up. That's what it means. All right, fine. All right. And if a fellow kiss ups to his friend, he's going to fall in his hands. And if he doesn't fall in his friend's hands, he's going to fall into his children's hands. He's going to fall into his grandson's hands. Shenema's pasuk says, "Vayomer Yirmiyah leChananya." Jeremiah says to Hananiah. The Hananiah had prophesied that the Klei Hamikdash that were exiled with Yechoniah. So Hananiah said that they were going to come back in 2 years. Now that was a lie. It wasn't a true prophecy. But Yirmiyah didn't call him out for being a fake, for being a liar. Rather, he says, Amen, Ken Yaisa Hashem. Yeah, yes, that would be great. If God does that, Yakim Hashem Estaverecha, God will be Mekayim what you have to say. So he was kissing up to him. Uchsiv, and sure enough, it says, Vayomid b'shar ben Yamin v'sham, ba'pkidus u'shmo Yiriyah ben Shelemya, that Yirmiyah was by the gate of Benjamin, and there was Yiriyah ben Shelemya ben Hananiah, the grandson of Hananiah. Vayispos es Yirmiyahu Anovi, and Yiriyah grabbed Jeremiah, Lamar, to say, Elakastim ata nofel, that you're going to fall into the Castilians. Vayomer Yirmiyahu, and Yirmiyahu says, Sheker, it's a lie. Eini nofel elakastim v'gomer. I'm not going to fall to the Kastim. Uchsiv vayispos Yirmiyahu. I switched that because that's the actual pasuk. Vavi'eu elasarim, and Yirmiyahu took Jeremiah to the officers. So we see that Jeremiah kissed up to Hananiah, and then he fell in his grandson's hands. For Amr Belazar says, Belazar called Eda Sheyesh Ba Chanufa, any congregation that kisses up Meusa Kenida, they are like a nida. Okay, Shnemar, the Belazar says, Ki Adis Chonev Galmod, that a congregation of kisser uppers is Galmod, Shekem Karchim Kor in the Nida Galmuda, and in the cities of the sea, they call a nida a Galmuda. So, okay, my Gamuda, why does Gamuda mean Nida Gemula mi Baila, that she's separated from her husband? Vamar Belazar says, Belazar kol edeshesh b'chanufa, any congregation that kisses up, the Sov Gola, in the end is going to be exiled. Ksivacha ki adas chonev galmod, uchsivasim ve'amarta bilvavcha, ve'amrit bilvavech, and you will say in your heart, miyola li esele, who bird to me these, bani shchula v'galmuda, Gola v'sura v'gomer. So we say Galmuda and also Gola, exiled. So anybody who's a kisser upper is going to be exiled. Amr B'Yirmiyah Bar Abba says, B'Yirmiyah Bar Abba, Arba Kitos Ein Mekablos Pnei Shechina. There are 4 categories of people that do not receive the face of the divine presence. Kas Leitzim, the group of Nudniks. Mikas Chanifim, the group of kisser uppers. Mikas Shkarim, the group of liars. Mikas Misapi Lashon Hara, and the group of Lashon Hara, the gossipers. Kas Leitzim, the group of Nudniks, the pasuk says, Moshach Yado Es Lotzisim, that he removed his hands, he pulled back from the Nudniks. Kas Chanifim, the Kilolofon of Chonev Yavo, that the kisser uppers will not come before him. Kas Shkarim, the liars, the Dover Shkarim Lo Yikon, and the Neged Einai, that liars will not be before my eyes. Kas Misapi Lashon Hara, the gossipers. The pasuk says, Ki lo kel chafetz resha ata lo yagor chara, tzadik ata Hashem lo yagor b'magor chara. That there won't be Lashon Hara in the dwelling of God. Hadron Allah Elun Amar, and we will come back to you. These are said. Wow. Okay, that was a lot of Gemara. We did about a daf and a half today. We learned some interesting stuff. We learned about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he would read from the Sefer Torah and then give those blessings. We also learned about Hakel, when the king on the year following Shemitah would read from the Sefer Torah and bless the people. Very, very interesting stuff on Daf Mem Aleph of Masechta Sotah. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.